Alec Murdaugh getting a chance to face his victims in court and apologize, kind of. Maybe rebut some of the things they have to say. Maybe get his own narrative in there a little bit stronger, so he thought. Here to discuss the sentencing of Alec Murdaugh and his most recent court appearance, Neama Rahmani, former federal prosecutor and attorney. Uh, Neema, there's a lot to unpack in what happened in the courtroom the other day, from the victim impact statements to the meandering 45-minute speech by Alec Murdaugh about everything. What was your takeaways from what we saw?
My takeaway was, and I watched the whole thing and actually covered it live, was that you know the case was really about financial fraud and the victims, but it really turned into the murders, right?
Yeah.
So obviously the victims started talking about the impact on them, and look, Murdoch did horrible things, right? I mean, these are people that were seriously injured; they had lost loved ones, and he stole from them,
Yeah.
and he stole a lot of money from them. So, the focus should have been on them, and frankly, I was surprised at how gracious and forgiving many of them were.
Hmm.
Many of them talked about God, and you know, they were very cordial
Hmm.
to their former lawyer and convicted felon and thief. What was also interesting is many of them were addressing Murdoch directly. Normally, when it comes to victim impact statements, you're supposed to talk to the judge, and really, it's because the judge is the one who's making a decision. But they were addressing Murdoch. He was kind of responding in some instances directly to them. So that part was interesting and certainly unique. And then, of course, when Murdoch gets up to give his own statement, he's talking about Buster and how Sled reminded him a little bit of OJ,
A little bit.
trying to find the real killers, right?
Yes. Yes.
So it did have OJ vibes, but the whole thing, it was fascinating TV, but it was somewhat anticlimactic because there's different types of pleas. Some
Mhm.
pleas where the judge determines the sentence. This was a binding plea. So the judge rejected the 27-year recommendation. The whole agreement would be unwound and the case was going to go to trial. And I didn't think that was going to happen. So I thought Judge Newman was going to rubber stamp this deal and retire and be on his way.
Uh-huh.
And that's exactly what happened.
It certainly was some dramatic moments there in court. Were you surprised at all by, I guess, Alec's statement, or the fact that Judge Clifton Newman let him go on for as long as he did? What was supposed to be a quick little 5 minute speech turned into, basically kind of preaching to the choir about how horrible of a human being he is.
Yeah, it was very long. And Judge Newman, maybe because it's such a high profile case that was being watched around the world. I think he basically let a lot more go, maybe because it was one of his probably last cases he was going to handle on the bench. I think he said he had 30 or 40 days left as a judge
Hmm.
before he retired. So he was counting down the days, but really sort of anything goes. And I think he just let the parties and the lawyers and the victims just talk. And that's exactly what happened.
There was a moment in there that it stood out to me. It was when he was talking about the Gloria Satterfield death, and basically trying to scam the insurance company. His choice of words were a little weird to me, and maybe you can make more sense of it. And I'm just paraphrasing here, but it was something to the effect of with the monies that were recovered there, that it was in good intent. I didn't have any ill intent here when I made up the story about the dogs tripping Gloria. Um, I'm You made up the story. Hasn't that been the story the entire time? Is there another story we're unaware of here? Because my mind goes to, well, what really happened to Gloria then? Because if it was unintentional, whether it was the dogs, whether she slipped on a sock, whether she just tripped, whatever it may be, if it's unintentional, the insurance company's probably not going to care. Either way, they will pay out. It was something that was unintentional. But if you go to intentional, then you have a whole other issue at play where the insurance company would not, in fact, likely pay out, at least the way that they did. Was that a Freudian slip on the part of Alec Murdaugh at that moment?
I don't think so, and this is why. For there to be a personal injury case, there has to be some sort of negligence, right? So if Gloria, tripped and fell on her own and nothing that Murdoch or any of the other family members did, there would be no personal injury claim, right? So what he did was try to set up a case where he was negligent, right? The dogs were out, and he didn't, leash them up or just wasn't careful. That way, Gloria's family could go after his own insurance company. Of course, he couldn't do that, so he gave the case to his friend to sue his own insurance. The
Hmm.
insurance tendered the money, gave a settlement, and of course, uh, Murdoch and his friends stole the money from. So it's kind of a fascinating fraud scheme. But there had to have been some sort of negligence for Murdoch's insurance policy to pay if it was just sort of an accident and he
Sure.
wasn't at fault. Then the insurance wouldn't kick in. But he did admit to the scheme. So first he duped the insurance company, then he duped the victim's family, and he's just been a fraudster all around.
But why did he have to dupe the insurance company? I guess is the question. It couldn't. Yeah, I mean, he can't necessarily sue himself, but yeah, he had somebody else go in and file the lawsuit on the behalf of Satterfield. But what was the duping there? I mean, why wouldn't they
Well,
still
if
have filed a claim
yeah, so
she did trip over dogs for negligence?
well, there would have to be some sort of theory of liability, right?
Sure.
There's some sort of claims that are, no fault claims, like maybe she could file a workers' compensation claim, right?
Okay.
If you're injured on the job, you're paid no matter what. Now the payments are a lot less, but for there to be a tort claim, a third party personal injury claim, there has to be some liability on the part
Okay.
of the defendant. So he manufactured the liability. It sounds like he had nothing to do with her death
Mhm.
necessarily, but tried to create a theory where he was involved, he was at fault, he was responsible to get his insurance, his liability insurance to pay.
Okay, that makes a little more sense in terms of all of that. What was your take on the very end of it? Judge Clifton Newman gave a very another. I love his speeches that he gives because they're very insightful. It reminds me of like Grandpa giving you little
Yeah, yeah.
insight from years and years of life. What was your take at the very end, though, where Alec Murdaugh he literally started laughing on the way out of court?
Yeah, it was surprising. I mean, Judge Newman gave his own statement. I think one of the most fascinating parts, again, obviously, look, this is the cardinal sin for a lawyer. I'm a lawyer to steal from your clients, but you know, they're stealing from your clients and there's killing your own wife and son. So, and what was really interesting about Newman's speech this time around was he was talking about a conference he was at and he saw Murdoch poolside after the conference, shortly after his family members were killed. And it
Mhm.
was just very sort of interesting that again, even Judge Newman went down the murder route, even though the case was just about the fraud.
Yeah.
So I thought it was fascinating. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the murder case. Of course, that's we have an evidentiary hearing, and there's a possibility of a new trial. So, I think yes, sort of by 85% by statute there in South Carolina. So, you can do the math. There's a possibility that again, if the murder conviction is overturned
Mhm.
and he actually wins when there's a new trial, we might see good old Murdoch back on the street. I think when he's 75 or 76.
Yeah, he'll be in at the IHOP and telling all sorts
Yeah,
of stories. That let's talk about that possibility because for a little while there, I was thinking, I don't know. I mean, even if there is some impropriety by Becky Hill, if it only like one person says maybe I heard this, it's kind of in question or gray area, maybe they would just say, look, we got the verdict, we're done. But now we have her son who has been charged with wire tapping. Now, at this moment, we don't really know exactly how, why, if this connects to Murdaugh, if at all, but it is important to note that he is the Colton County Information Technology Director, works in the same place as mom, works with the same people as mom. I don't know that I couldn't tell you anybody of my friends or family that have ever been involved in wiretapping. Um, it doesn't seem like a common thing to do unless maybe you have to do this for some sort of reason that may be somewhat criminal. And it is kind of odd that your mom has, people are kind of shining the microscope on her. Do you think there's a connection here between the wiretapping of son and mom with the allegations of jury tampering?
it's certainly possible. And again, you're right, Tony. This is not something that you see typically charged. You don't have people eavesdropping with microphones or listening in on conversations, but that's what happened here, right? And again, He works for the county as well. He's the technology director. So I'm sure we're going to have a lot more information very soon about this case. SLED's investigating it. He was out on bond, but whether there's a plea or whether the case goes to trial, it's going to be interesting to see what connection this has, if any, to Becky Hill's case. And of course, Becky's looking at her own potential charges for jury tampering. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, I mean, an evidentiary hearing is really what's needed in this. Why haven't we seen one scheduled yet?
I think the issue was it was up on appeal, right? So when the case is up on appeal, trial court can't do anything. And then there was a question of, is Judge Newman going to preside over this? Is he going to retire? Of course, he's a potential witness in the case. If he'll talk to him, now we're going to have a new judge. So between the appellate court and the new judge, it just put things on hold. But it absolutely has to happen because that's going to be the basis of the motion for a new trial.
Were you at all surprised by Alec in the sentencing, going back and reiterating again and again and again that he did not kill Maggie and Paul? Does that
Yeah.
have any sort of weight going forward with the possibility of another trial, or is it just kind of the ramblings of Alec Murdaugh? He's still sticking to his story.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that Alec was talking about Maggie and Papa, but I'm surprised the judge let him go on for so long about it because, again, you know, obviously we know that the big story is the murder case, but really this was a case about fraud. So what does this have to do with anything? But again, you know, Murdaugh's gonna Murdaugh, and that's exactly what he did. And he thought he's still a trial lawyer in court and trying to argue to the judge, even though, again, doesn't have anything to do with this case. But not surprised he did it. Just really more surprised that Judge Newman just let it go on for so long.
Yeah, I think that was a great line you had there. Murdaugh's gonna
Yeah,
Murdaugh.
yeah.
Very much so. Hey, it's Tony Brueski. If you want more of our interview with our guests, be sure to check out our podcast, Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. Just search that wherever you download podcasts and press subscribe. Also, you can check out our YouTube channel for the full video version of the interviews as well, under the same name, Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. Check it out, subscribe, binge, and enjoy. Thanks for watching.